Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of AI Bible Story Podcasts. Today, we have a very special guest, someone who faced one of the most monumental tasks in human history. He built an ark, saved his family, and preserved life on earth during the Great Flood. Please welcome Noah. Noah, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Donald. It's an honor to be here. I don't get many chances to share my story, so this is quite special for me.
Well, we're thrilled to have you. Let's start at the beginning. What was it like when God first told you to build the ark? How did you feel, and what went through your mind when you heard his plan?
Honestly, Donald, it was overwhelming. I remember it so clearly. God said to me, I have decided to put an end to all people, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. I am surely going to destroy both them and the earth. So make yourself an ark of cypress wood. That's from Genesis 6, verses 13 and 14. At first, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I mean, a flood? Covering the entire earth? It was hard to grasp, but I knew it was God speaking, so I trusted him. Still, I felt the weight of it all, the responsibility, the enormity of the task.
That's incredible. I can't imagine what that must have felt like. So you started building the ark. What was that process like? I mean, building a massive boat in a world that had never seen rain. How did people react?
Oh, it was challenging, to say the least. People thought I was out of my mind. They'd never seen rain before, let alone a flood. They'd laugh, mock, and call me crazy. But I kept going because I knew God had spoken. Day after day, I worked on that ark, with my sons by my side. It took years, 120 years, in fact. And through it all, I kept thinking about God's promise. But I will establish my covenant with you, and you will enter the ark, you and your sons and your wife and your sons' wives with you. That's Genesis 6:18. That promise kept me going, even when the ridicule felt unbearable.
120 years of building and preaching. That's a long time to stay faithful. Did you ever doubt? Did you ever feel like giving up?
Of course, I had moments of doubt. I'm only human, Donald. There were times when I wondered if I'd heard God correctly, or if I was just wasting my time. But every time I felt that way, God would remind me of his promise. He'd give me the strength to keep going. And then, when the rain finally came and the floodwaters rose, I knew it had all been worth it. Seeing God's plan unfold was both terrifying and awe-inspiring.
Let's talk about that moment. The flood itself. What was it like inside the ark when the rain started pouring and the waters rose?
It was surreal. At first, it was just the sound of rain hitting the roof, something no one had ever heard before. But then the waters began to rise and the ark started to float. The animals were calm, almost as if they knew this was part of God's plan. But outside, it was chaos. The cries of people. It was heartbreaking. I'll never forget the sound. I wanted to save them, Donald. I preached for 120 years, begging them to turn back to God, but they wouldn't listen. It was devastating.
That's heavy. I can't imagine the mix of emotions you must have felt. Relief for your family's safety, but grief for those who didn't make it. How did you cope with that?
It wasn't easy. I leaned on God. I remembered his promise, not just to save us, but to start anew. After the flood, when we finally stepped out of the ark, God gave us a sign, a rainbow. He said, I have set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. That's from Genesis 9:13. It was a reminder that even in judgment, God's mercy and love endure. That gave me hope.
That's beautiful. Let's talk about life after the flood. What was it like stepping out of the ark onto a completely changed world?
It was strange. The earth felt so different. The air was fresh, the ground was soft, and the silence was almost overwhelming. We were the only ones left, just my family and the animals. It was a new beginning, but it was also lonely. I remember offering a sacrifice to God, thanking Him for His protection, and God responded with a promise. Never again will I curse the ground because of humans, even though every inclination of the human heart is evil from childhood. And never again will I destroy all living creatures as I have done. That's from Genesis 8:21. It was a promise of grace, even though He knew humanity's flaws.
That's such a powerful moment. Let's dive a little deeper into the ark itself. What was it like living on the ark for all those months? How did you manage with all those animals?
Ah, the ark. It was an adventure, to say the least. Imagine living in close quarters with your family and thousands of animals for over a year. The smells, the sounds, it was a lot to handle. But God gave us the wisdom to care for them. Each animal had its place, and somehow it all worked. There were moments of chaos, like when the lions would roar or the birds would squawk, but there were also moments of beauty. Watching the animals interact, seeing how they relied on us, it was a reminder of God's care for all His creation. And through it all, we relied on God's provision. He kept us safe, fed, and sane.
That's amazing. It sounds like the ark was more than just a boat. It was a sanctuary, a place of God's protection. Do you think there's a parallel there for us today?
Absolutely. The ark is a picture of God's salvation. Just as the ark was the only way to survive the flood, Jesus is the only way to be saved from sin and judgment. In John 14:6, Jesus says, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. The ark was a physical refuge, but Jesus is our spiritual refuge. He's the ultimate fulfillment of God's promise to save us.
That's such a profound connection. Let's talk about your family. What was it like going through this experience with them? Did it bring you closer together?
It did, but it wasn't always easy. We had our moments of tension, especially during the long months on the ark, but we also grew closer through the shared experience of trusting God. My wife, my sons, and their wives, we all had to rely on each other and on God. It taught us the importance of faith, patience, and unity. And when we finally stepped out of the ark, we were more than a family. We were a team, bound together by what we'd been through.
That's beautiful. Do you think your story has a message for us today? What can we learn from your experience?
Absolutely. My story is about faith and obedience. Even when the world thinks you're crazy, it's about trusting God's promises even when they seem impossible. And it's about God's mercy. He always provides a way for those who follow Him. Just like He saved us in the ark, He offers salvation to all who turn to Him. As it says in 2 Peter 3:9, the Lord is not slow in keeping His promise, as some understand slowness. Instead, He is patient with you, not wanting anyone to perish, but everyone to come to repentance.
Wow, that's powerful. So, what would you say to someone listening who feels like they're in their own flood? Someone facing overwhelming challenges or doubts?
I'd tell them to hold on to God's promises. He is faithful, even when the storm feels never ending. Just like He guided us through the flood, He will guide you through your trials. Trust Him, even when it doesn't make sense. And remember, the rainbow always comes after the rain. God's promises are like that rainbow, a reminder that His love and mercy are always there, even in the darkest times.
That's a message of hope if I've ever heard one. Noah, thank you for sharing your story with such honesty and heart. It's amazing to see how your faith and obedience still inspire us today.
Thank you, Donald. It's been a privilege to share my journey with your listeners.
Listeners, if you take one thing away from this episode, let it be this. No matter how overwhelming life gets, God's promises are true. He is faithful, and He will always provide a way for those who trust Him. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode of AI Bible Story podcasts. Until next time, stay curious, stay hopeful, and remember, no matter what, you're never too far from God's love. Stay tuned for our next episode.